always knew I would be a writer. There was never the slightest suggestion I wouldn't be, because I was writing from the time I was 6 years old. I was writing plays for the neighborhood kids. My mother lent us a red velvet curtain to use as the curtain on the stage, and we did them in the garage. So for me, it was always, always there. There was no doubt. Also, I had no other talent. I can't draw or paint. Mother St. Jane suggested I use the art class as a reading period. But the one thing I could do was write. I just wanted to tell my own stories. Now, I have no rhythm for music whatsoever, to my great regret, but I do have a rhythm for words. I know how the characters speak in the sense of the words they use just fit in. You get the guy who's not educated is not going to speak like someone who's well educated. Doesn't make him any less of a human being or any smarter in his own way, but there's a difference in the rhythm. When I was 15, I worked after school. I went downtown and I was a telephone operator from 4 till 7. Hotel Shelton, good afternoon. But if I got downtown early, I would go to Fifth Avenue and walk down and pick out the clothes I would have when I was a successful writer. And of course, I couldn't go to college at the time. My father had died, and I thought I'd better go to secretarial school and bring some money in. We had $78 a month income, and I always regretted I didn't go then. Although I went years later and graduated, going to night school. I had 11 short stories in the mail at the same time, and I would get the printed rejection slip that seemed automatic. And I thought, someday I will show you cold-eyed editors on Madison Avenue. I will show you. And I always refer to Redbook. One time they put at the bottom of the rejection slip, Mrs. Clark, your stories are light, slight, and trite. I'll get you, I will get you. And another time I sent Redbook a novella, and the comment was, we found the heroine as boring as her husband had. In that case, I wasn't heard. It was like charging a Red Bull. I will get you. And then I started to sell to the magazines. If I didn't sell here, I sold in England for less money. I had made about $7,000 the year before, which was good by the prices of those days. And I had made $50 by the September of 1964. Warren said he was supporting an indigent writer, which was entirely true. But that was the same year, that 1964, was when my agent said, I can't sell short stories. All of the big magazines, Redbook, Ladies' Home Journal, Saturday Evening Post, went on to become only how-tos. How to be your husband's best friend, how to grow grass, how to look 20 when you're 60. So my agent said, unless you write a book, I can't get you published. So that was when I thought, well, I have to think of a book as 20 chapters put together with the same characters. I was 36 when Warren died, so I just had a few $1,000s of veterans pension. The night of the funeral, I said to my mother, go home. And I sat in the living room in the big wing chair, and I thought, I am going to dedicate my life to the children and any downtime I have to writing, because I made up my mind right then that with 5 young children, I would never get interested again in any man until they were all raised. Because I thought, A, I would not stay home. I want to be independent. and B, with 5 children, one might like 4, but not the 5th. So I said, there's better the picture on the wall than someone who might change a dynamic. So I made that my decision up that time, and I did. My downtime, I did writing. I really want to write every day. I used to get up at 5 o'clock, and that was the most creative time in the world. The phone doesn't ring, the bell doesn't ring, even the dog wasn't awake. Now I'm not that good. I can't get up that early. I get to work after breakfast. You look for ideas. For example, I read the newspaper and take the nucleus of an idea, of the story, and say, now that would work. I mean, well, years ago I based Where Are the Children on a famous trial. Alice Crimmins was accused of murdering her 2 children, not going out dancing and the house burned down, but the deliberate murder. She was acquitted on one, found guilty on the other, and the conviction was reversed. She spent very little time in prison, came out, married her wealthy contractor boyfriend, and lived happily ever after. But my take from it, suppose an innocent young mother is found guilty of the death of her 2 children, and then 6 years later, to the day, on her 31st birthday, the children of her second marriage disappear.
Oh, God.
That was Where Are the Children? And then another one at that time, they were doing the CB radios, and they said it's so wonderful as a woman is alone and her car breaks down and she can get on the CB. And I thought, let every loner come looking for her. So that became A Stranger Is Watching.
All right, to the gate. Okay. Ready, mark, get set, go!
There's always something. There is always something that you catches your eye, something in a newspaper, something you hear. I used to go to trials all the time. Now I can't because I'm recognized, and I don't want to be anyone but just a faceless person sitting in. And I got plots from those trials, just the essence of the trials. One I based on Madoff, on what he did, where somebody disappears with a load of money. Was his son involved in it? I always have to know where the book is going. It's as though you're going from New York to California, and you don't know whether you'll go by the north route or the south route, but you know you're going to end up in California. And you have to know who did it. And I do bios of the people, where they went to school, what kind of family background they have. So I've got to know the people before I can start writing. And the first 50 pages are always rewritten and rewritten and rewritten until I get to know the people. In fact, when John and I were married 20 years ago, widower, I was writing a book, and he said to one of my daughters, I'm worried about your mother. This book is useless. Might as well throw it out the window. The characters are dull. The situation is terrible. And Patty said, oh, for God's sake, we've heard that for 30 books. I see people whom I've known, and I visualize that face and hear the way they talk. There was one time when I, I did a book, Still Watch, and in it I have a guy who is very pompous, who wants to know if your father went to Yale with his father, that kind of stuff. And I had a character in the book who sounded like that. And I always read the first copy of the book. Now I'm not looking to change a word here or there. I read it as a reader. And when I read that book, this guy jumped out. It was obviously my friend's husband. I mean, it was so obvious, I was sweating blood. And about 2 weeks later, my friend phoned and she said, "Oh, Mary, we have read Still Watch." I thought, oh, dear God, what's she going to say? She said, "That character," named the one who was after her husband. "John and I know so many people just like that." I said, "Thank you, God, I will never, ever come that close."
Do you recognize the handwriting?
Yes. My father wrote this.
Do you have any idea why she was carrying your name and address in your father's handwriting?
No. Maybe he met her on a business trip and commented on how much she looked like me and gave this to her thinking she could look me up if she came here.
9 months ago?
I'm sorry, Lieutenant Story. I am just as confused as you are.
Well, first, what is the plot? You've got to know what the plot is. This one does something, this one lost something. In the first one, 2 children vanish, and the mother is going to be accused of their murder.
Mrs. Eldridge, I think it's going to be better for everybody if we continue this down at the station.
I didn't hurt the children.
And you know the guy who has the children and what he's planning to do to them. So it's an hour by hour, minute by minute. And it only takes place in 8 hours, that book. Where are the children? I think it's always in the back of your mind what you're doing, or maybe part of the front of your mind. I remember one night when I was doing Loves Music, Loves to Dance, and I didn't want someone to say he went that-a-way. And I thought, how can I get them to know where he has taken her? And in the middle of the night, I woke up and said, "LoJack." That was the car tracer, the first one. And I had to change the location in New Jersey of where the guy, what town he was in, because the police had the tracer in it. And that was a moment of absolute inspiration. Suppose, what if, and why? Suppose the situation happened. What if, instead of this true case, you can expand it into something else? And the big question is why? There has to be a reason an action was taken. There has to be a motive. Why is also motive, certainly in suspense writing. Why did he do that? What was his psychological bent towards kidnapping those children? It is magical. And of course, as a writer, I want to give people or introduce them to the same magic of wanting that character to get back home safely. I want to give that so that you're with the character. You're worried. You're saying, watch out, don't trust it. And when you can do that, you have a book that people say I enjoyed. I think you start at home with role models. Certainly my mother, and certainly the memory of my father, because I was Daddy's girl. I think Charles Dickens, the Bronte sisters, Betty Smith jumps to mind, A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. That was a brilliant book, absolutely brilliant. The great biographers, David McCullough, Michael Corder, my editor, they get under the person, they get into the personal life, and you feel the way that person is feeling. You know them as people as you do in fiction. The poets, and I love the poets of the 19th century, the rhyming of them. The highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. You can hear the horse's hooves when you're doing that. Little boy blue, and don't you go away, he said, and don't you make any noise. And toddling up to his trundle bed, he said to his pretty toys. And while he was dreaming an angel song, awakened our little boy blue. Oh, the years are many, the years are long, but the little toy friends are true. Now, to me, that's poetry. I have had to defend where I live, in New Jersey, and it infuriates me when I hear people knock New Jersey. They've never been here, for God's sake. That's why I've set 5 or 6 books in New Jersey. One in Saddle River. I called it Chapin River, that very first one. One in Ridgewood. One in Mendham. One in Spring Lake. We have a home there. And it's as though you go back into the 19th century. The Victorian houses, the look and the feel of it, absolutely lovely. I want people to realize that New Jersey has many beautiful communities, and that's why I want a medal. No one has written more about the beautiful places to go and the lovely areas that we have than I have, because I'm passionate about it. I have to say I've been a worldwide bestseller. I mean, even from the tiniest places. No matter how successful you are, you don't think of yourself, you don't look in and kiss the mirror. You think, I could have done that a little better, I could have, but I think that's good. The minute you think you're so marvelous is the day that you start to go, 15 minutes of fame. No, I always question myself, and should. It's a source of energy to be working. Energy creates energy, and I love it when I am just going from brain to page. That's wonderful. Since I've been doing 1 book a year, and sometimes 2, but those were the shorter books I did with Carol, and those were the humorous ones. And now I am doing the Under Suspicion series with Alistair Burke. Our 3rd book in that series is just coming out in November, and All Dressed in White is just coming out in paperback. And that was because the publishers liked the characters in my book, I've Got You Under My Skin. They said, we want these characters to go forward, where it's a young television producer who does a different kind of crime show. She gets unsolved crimes and asks the people who have been under suspicion to get on television and tell their stories. So in a collaboration, Alistair and I get together, talk about what we want to do, discuss the plot. She does the first draft. I go over it completely and change things, put my own language in. She does a second version. I go over that. And by then, we're pretty much where we want to be. Let a child be a child. Well, frankly, I'm sorry for them today, because there's no such thing as playtime. 2-year-olds are learning Chinese. I think some of it is wonderful, but on the other hand, let them be creative. Let them play with dough and sand and build things. 2-year-olds discover for themselves. They build things by themselves. You see them pushing something and reacting to it. And I think one thing I would say to parents and teachers, don't ever cut a child down. Now, I had one teacher, it was in the 5th grade, and I still remember because I had done something about George Washington. I ended up writing a book about him, incidentally, and it was a bestseller. But she held up my drawing and she said, "Who did this horror?" And a kid does not forget. My math teacher in high school, science and math, she was always after me because I was much more interested in writing a short story than dissecting a frog. In fact, many years later, when I went back with 15 #1 bestsellers under my belt, and she was sitting in a wheelchair, those clear gray eyes, she knew the girl and she knew the woman. And her greeting to me was, "You are a dreadful math student, Miss Higgins." And I curtsied to her as we did in the old days, and I said, "God bless your memory, Reverend Mother." But the point is, she was fair. She sent me to summer school for 3 points. I was a scholarship student, and I had to have 85, and I had 82. And I got 98 in the summer. And when I put it on her desk, I tried not to slap it down. She didn't say, "Congratulations." She said, "Shows what you can do when you study, Miss Higgins." Absolutely right. But there's a difference between that and ridicule. And if a parent or a teacher ridicules a child, you can stifle ambition. The well-loved child has the greatest beginnings of all. I would certainly say the trite words, but meaningful, follow the dream. I would say to writers, want to be or feeling as though they must, do a lot of reading. Educate your own mind, and you will pick up the words that are used, you will pick up the rhythm of language. So that's very important to read. And the other thing is to do it, because the worst thing in the world is to say, when I get a little more time, when I quit my job, when the children grow up, when the dog dies, I'll have time to write. There will be a new set of excuses that will set in, equally valid, equally valid. You can't tell me that you can't find the time, no matter how busy you are, because I've been there and done that. I've had people say, "I wrote a book and it got rejected twice, so I guess I'm not a writer." I said, "No, you're not a writer, not if you think like that. Write the next book and the next book and the next book." I'm sensitive, but I was never sensitive about rejection. Never. I considered a rejection a challenge, or I thought, what am I doing wrong? What can I do to make this story better? So I think you are blessed if you have that attitude. As I joked about, some of the letters of rejection I got would curl your hair. But it always was, "I'll show you, baby, I'll show you. Wait and see." I think confidence in yourself is very important, because as happened with me, the editors will reject you. And you have to have that feeling, I can do it, I will do it, by God, I'll do it.